Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. I figured we'd have a chat today about something that has been a bit of a topic of discussion recently in the zombies community and also just in the sort of Call of Duty community at large. Essentially, the question is zombies dead? And is, therefore, CoD also dying, or is CoD dying and therefore zombies is dying? What's the deal? Because we've had a couple of CoD games in the last couple of years, Black Ops 3 excluded of course, that have been kind of off the mark, and people have felt like maybe CoD is in decline now, and just generally there's been a lot of discussion about that sort of thing. And the reason I'm even thinking about this right now, just after a new CoD has come out, is that Charlie Intel a couple of days ago published an article saying that Call of Duty World War II has earned over $500 million of sales in its first 3 days of being released. Essentially, its opening weekend generated 500 mil in revenue. And it also set a record on PS4 for digital day one sales. Now, I'm going to jump into the specifics of that announcement itself, but I'm also going to put into context what it means and look at some previous years as well and say, okay, how does this stack up to Black Ops 3, which in 2015 was the biggest entertainment launch that year, certainly at the time of release at least, and also Infinite Warfare as well. How does it stack up compared to that kind of game, and where are we right now? So, straight off the bat, Black Ops 3, in its opening weekend, generated around about $550 million of revenue, which is an astounding number, okay? That's a ridiculously large amount of money, and it therefore became the biggest entertainment launch that year. It was huge, that game. That release was really significant, and on top of that, the Activision kind of press releases and things like that were pulling out really interesting data, like, for example, the fact that the player engagement for Black Ops 3 was higher than they had ever seen previously in a Call of Duty title. So more people were playing for more hours than they had ever seen before. Interestingly, with Destiny, for example, as well, they talked a lot about that very same metric. A lot of the Destiny player base were playing for, on average, something like 3 hours a day, every day since launch, as late as 6 months after the game came out. And so there was a huge player engagement there, and it's definitely a good gauge for whether a game is doing its job and not only interesting people initially, but also keeping them stimulated and motivated and interested in playing throughout the duration of however long they play the game for. So for Black Ops 3, not only did they sell a huge number of copies and have a lot of success there, but the people that got the copies were also clearly enjoying the game because they were playing it so damn much. Then, something interesting happened with Infinite Warfare. If I recall correctly, at the time of launch, I think it was the opening week that this metric was being given for, they made half as many sales as they normally would, so the game sold really rather poorly compared to something like Black Ops 3, but the revenue only dropped 75%, or to 75% rather, so it dropped 25%. And that was really interesting to me, because it seemed like a weird change for 3/4 of the amount of revenue that they'd normally make being made, but only selling half the copies. So they're essentially making more money per copy than they have previously. And then I realized that the reason for it was that they bundled in Modern Warfare Remastered with the expensive versions of the game, and so of course there was more interest in the pro versions of the game that year, and as such, people were spending more money, but only buying one copy of the game as they normally do, and so yes, the sales dropped, but people were getting another game on top, and so that's where the extra revenue would have come from. Similarly, the Season Pass attach rate, so the number of people that bought the Season Pass with the game for Black Ops 3 was much higher for similar reasons. We can look at some other things that Infinite Warfare sort of missed the mark on as well. I mean, that launch trailer, or rather, sorry, the reveal trailer, ended up with 3 million dislikes. Yikes. One of the most disliked videos on YouTube. They did a pretty bad job there, but when you think about it, at the time, people were like, whoa, this is crazy, like it's become a meme to hate Call of Duty, and does this mean that COD is going to be stuck with this forever? And yet, as soon as they went into World War II marketing, that evaporated. It is gone. No one is saying, oh, it's cool to hate COD right now, because everyone's playing COD. They are too busy playing World War II. Activision themselves have said that they kind of missed the mark with Infinite Warfare. They tried to innovate in the wrong way, and they didn't really respect the fact that, as a very long-term franchise, they have to kind of stay true to what they've always done while still managing to innovate in interesting ways. And I mean, most recently, the Activision CEO has said that at the end of the day, Infinite Warfare just didn't feel enough like Call of Duty, and if anything, it amplified the demand for boots on the ground that much more. But this is really interesting to me, okay? Because this is the Activision CEO putting a statement out there, which, by the way, always means that they have looked forward to the future and gone, what do we need to have in people's heads for the next 2, 3, 4 years? And then gone, okay, we're going to say these in a press release now. They are looking ahead with this, and they're saying that the need for boots on the ground is amplified, so we can draw some sort of inferences for Black Ops 4, but also that Infinite Warfare didn't feel enough like Call of Duty. And the reason I find this so interesting is that to me says that they're pushing us into the kind of headspace that says that Black Ops 4 is going to feel like a Call of Duty, in the kind of very cliched Call of Duty way. And that conflicts with everything I think Treyarch are going to be doing with Black Ops 4. And the kind of, I suppose, natural progression for the game would be. Because at this point, they can't just make Black Ops 4. It has to be something else. It has to be some unique twist on the franchise, because Black Ops 3 was already too safe. Already! And to do that again, it's a recipe for disaster. So I'm very curious as to why they are here saying that the amplified need for boots on the ground CODs, and for CODs that just feel like COD and don't really necessarily go beyond that. I mean, they do say the biggest risk you can take is not taking risks, but we found the guardrail of creativity with Infinite Warfare and didn't really pull it off. And I'm just curious as to how they're going to transform what they're saying now about needing that kind of classic COD feel, but then making a COD that doesn't really feel like a COD next year and still satisfying people? I don't know, man. But let's not stop there. Let's talk about World War II, okay? As I said a moment ago, World War II has earned $500 million in its first 3 days of sales. Now, to put that into context, okay, Thor Ragnarok just had its opening weekend. Wonder Woman had its opening weekend maybe a couple of months ago now. Those two films combined made less revenue in their opening weekend than just Call of Duty World War II on its own. So this is a big freaking deal. For further context, like I was saying about Black Ops 3 before, Black Ops 3 was the biggest entertainment launch that year, certainly at the time of release. And for this game to not quite surpass it, but to pretty much match it, is a really, really, really good sign. Like, seriously, this game, while it may not be as kind of crazy hyped on YouTube right now, in my opinion at least, as something like Black Ops 3 was, it still has so much room to grow, and that's really exciting, both as a content creator and just as a fan of the franchise. It's going to mean that Call of Duty is back, and it's back not just in terms of all the marketing campaign and all of the kind of core player base hype, but Call of Duty is back at large, at scale. And that's only going to mean good things for Treyarch's next game. Seriously, it's going to be good. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is that World War II launch has resulted in the highest total connected users on current-gen consoles and PC in COD history. Let that sink in for a moment. That means that despite last year being, at face value, pretty weak, they're still breaking their own records for highest number of people online concurrently on current gen. And that's a really, really good sign, okay? The community's not dwindling, it's not shrinking, it's actually growing, and yes, there are still people playing Black Ops 3, and that's contributing to that stat, so I don't want to mislead any of you and say that that's all on World War II, but it's a goddamn good sign, because for Black Ops 4, there's a very significant chance that all those Black Ops 3 players, and all those Infinite Warfare players, and all the World War II players all pile in to the new Treyarch title, and that's when things get really exciting. World War II has already sold twice as many copies as Infinite Warfare did in the same time period. That's really exciting. It means that the spending power of the community is still very much there. It hasn't gone away. They don't have to rely on more expensive versions in order to kind of do numbers. They just don't need it. They've doubled Infinite Warfare already, and they're going to be pushing towards Black Ops 3, and that's a really good sign too. And the other thing I said before about how they've also set a record on PSN, which is that in the opening day, the first launch day for World War II, they sold more digital copies of the game than they've ever sold any other full game in its first day on the PSN store, ever. So that's not just an entire player base thing, that's specific to PS4. They've smashed completely every other single full game's first launch day digital sales, which is really exciting. So overall, on the whole, to me, this just says that CoD is not dead. No matter what anyone says, CoD is still alive and kicking, and going from here into a Treyarch year is going to be a pretty lively occurrence rather than one full of rigor mortis and some coffin mold. We're going to be fine, okay? So that, at face value, is great. Now let's talk about zombies, okay? One of the things that I think I was most worried about this year was that Infinite Warfare's viewership compared to Black Ops 3 was definitely markedly more low. Chronicles came out and suddenly everyone's views doubled overnight. I wonder why. It's more classic zombies, it's more of the old stuff that we're all so used to, and so of course there's more interest in it. And that's not to say that Infinite Warfare was doing a bad job or anything along those lines, although people argue that all the time, sure. It's just that we're so used to Treyarch at this point that of course there's more interest for that content. And I was worried with Infinite Warfare that its kind of lack of pull for the community would mean that those people would go and stay gone, and the zombies community would never really recover. And I think to some extent, that has happened. I think that there are a lot of people that just lost interest with Infinite Warfare and haven't come back for World War II, but yes, and again, I'm stressing this, viewership over the last sort of month or so in the build-up to World War II was really bad. For everyone, across the board. There's a reason all the memes about this suddenly becoming the Fortnite community sprung up in the first place, okay? And that's because everyone started playing Fortnite and no one cared about zombies all of a sudden. But now, despite that viewership still kind of being on the rise again and still trying to find its feet, we have some really solid evidence that Sledgehammer are doing things in-game aside from the number of sales that they've actually managed to sort of come by, which is amazing, aside from all of that, they are doing things in-game that are really healthy for the longevity of the franchise. I'm specifically talking about a couple things, and I want to start off actually with a caveat, okay? The caveat is that they haven't got it all right, and that's to be expected. It's their first map, pretty much. I mean, Exo Zombies doesn't really count because of all the work that Raven were doing on that and all sorts of business there. Plus, this is their first actual on-disc map, regardless of if you count Exo Zombies or not. And so, there's got to be room for them to fail at some things. And the fact that the Easter egg was signaled in such a way that people thought that the casual quest was the main quest, and they got really disgruntled, and then the main quest got solved fairly easily, and people were even more disgruntled, and they were saying that it was unfair for this reason and that reason and all sorts of business. And that left a bit of a mark on the game's record, for sure. I don't disagree with that. And I think that it's a shame that it was solved so quickly, etc. But there are other things in there that are so promising. For example, these goddamn costumes, man. They've put costumes in the game that you have to do certain challenges for, and the challenges are actually difficult. Can I just stress a little more how good this is? Seriously, I had a probably 2 or 3 hour conversation with Liam, JC, Lex, and Azura when we were in the Boogie Boys house over the summer. And one of the things that we kept coming back to in that conversation, it was like 3 a.m. and we were all talking about how the hell Zombies is going to survive the next 12 months, right? And we were saying, what would be amazing to see is something even close to the recon system and really the skull kind of challenge system that Halo has had in the past. Halo did a really cool thing whereby you would basically have a certain challenge that would be absurdly difficult and would slightly modify your experience potentially as well. And if you could do that and potentially do it across multiple games as well, you'd get a reward that significantly distinguished you from every other player. Every other player would look at you and go, my goodness, I want to be that guy. I just want to be you. And Infinite Warfare tried to do this, I think, with the director's cut and the kind of fact that players without director's cut would see the players with director's cut and with all their flashy kind of blasters out of the mystery box and what have you, and they'd be excited by it and they'd be inspired to try and push towards getting that done themselves. And that was cool, but what World War II's done is so much better in my opinion, because if you do things like the entirety of the hardcore Easter egg without going down, or without perks, or you manage to get to round 20 on Final Reich without opening the bunker, or whatever it is, okay? There are a bunch of challenges, and if you manage to do all of them, it's not just one, you've got to do like 5 for each outfit. You get an outfit that not only is just an outfit, but also has new dialogue and is just genuinely awesome to see on disc. This is not a Der Eisendrache Panzerclaw on your hat, and that's that. It's not a Margwa mask that doesn't really go anywhere beyond giving you a couple of status effects that they would then rehash in Revelations as some grand feature that's meant to make the map replayable like Origins was replayable. It's not a kind of cop-out in that way. This is the real deal. It's basically another character. And just the fact that that's even something they bothered with, and something that they saw and thought, you know what, that is going to help the long-term life of the game, is so positive to me. And it just excites me for whatever the hell they're going to be planning during DLC. I mean, at this point, it wouldn't even surprise me, and this is something that I'll probably make another video on at some point, it wouldn't surprise me if Sledgehammer patched in even more content to Final Reich. In fact, let me know what you'd think of that in the comments down below. I'm curious. But it wouldn't surprise me, because I feel like they are taking serious, conscious decisions to try and maintain the long-term life of this map. And that excites me for the future. It excites me for the DLC. It excites me for the content kind of period of from about April next year through to November, because we're going to have a significant offering from World War II, and we're going to have all the Black Ops 4 marketing on top, and whatever else Treyarch or any of the other devs might be planning, seasonal events, that sort of thing. And it just brings me back to that one thought that I kind of started with, that one question. Is COD dead? No. Don't think so. Is Zombies dead? Definitely don't think so. Yes, on YouTube it's a little shaky right now, demonetization is a problem, etc. But I think we have a pretty exciting year ahead, and I just kind of wanted to share that in a video and give you guys a kind of slither of my positivity right now, because I'm excited. And I figured that would be something to convey on the channel and start a discussion about as well. So I've been MrRoflWaffles. If you've enjoyed the video, drop a like. Obviously, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of us that disagree with this. Some people probably think that Zombies is going downhill and there's nowhere they can really go from here and that Treyarch's game is doomed, etc. And that's fine. Just let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.